Hello, my name is Marisol Rubio. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the San Francisco Bay Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Today I am at Coco Cabana in Dublin, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being joined by Pamela Price, who is a civil rights attorney running for Alameda County District Attorney. Hello, Pamela. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, we're equally excited to have you here join us today. What I'd like to sort of start out with is a little bit about just making the community, your electorate, more familiar with who's Pamela and what experiences in her life, your life, brought you to this platform.
Sure. I am a civil rights attorney, as you've announced me. People need to know that I'm living my making. I got arrested when I was 13 years old in a civil rights demonstration. I was both traumatized and radicalized in the moment that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. For me, that was a signature moment because I could not understand as a very young person how somebody who stood for love and justice and peace could be killed. My 11-year-old mind could not process it. And so I became very troubled and very angry, and I ended up in juvenile hall and in foster homes, and then I got arrested, and things went downhill pretty quickly for me. So I had a very challenging juvenile experience as a teenager, barely finishing high school. But 3 foster moms really kept their hands on me and kept telling me to get my education. They kept saying, get your education. That's the one thing nobody can take from you. And because I could hear that message, I think because my birth mom was a teacher for 35 years. And so that resonated with me, and that kind of kept me grounded. And at times when I could have been doing some other things, I did go to school. I kept trying to go to school, and then finally managed to graduate literally by the grace of God and got accepted to Yale College as an emancipated minor on a full scholarship.
Wow, that's really amazing. And what a story. And I'm sure that in some capacity has shaped your worldview. In what ways specifically do you feel like, what lens has it taught you to see the world through?
Sure. The first lens is obviously I understand the challenges that young people face. I mean, my father said to me that in the midst of all my trials and tribulations and being rebellious, he said to me that Jesus reached the age of accountability when he was 13 years old. And that was his way of saying, okay, you can run out there, little bad girl, and make all these decisions, but you're going to be held accountable for them. And I was often held accountable. But I also understand that young people make mistakes, that they make decisions that are not always the best ones, and that you can never give up on a kid, ever, because you don't know where that child's going to go.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in speaking about, you've been serving the community for quite some time up until now. Outside of this very important position you have as a civil rights attorney, what are some of the community programs that you've been involved with up until now?
Sure. I served for about 8 years as an active member of the San Francisco Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. I served on the board of directors. I served as the interim executive director. I served as the director of special projects, and I served as chairwoman of the board for 2 terms. So I had a great experience working with lawyers in San Francisco and working for that organization, which at the time was 50 years old and provided robust immigration services as well as economic counseling, as well as we started under the direction of Latifah Simon, who I hired. She started the Second Chance program. So I was firmly embedded and had a great deal of experience dealing with nonprofits and being in partnership with nonprofit organizations, primarily legal organizations. I've been an active member of the National Lawyers Guild. I'm an active member of the State Trial Lawyers Association. This year, or this month, I'm actually the inaugural member of the year for the Alameda Contra Costa Trial Lawyers Association. So I've been active with them. I've always given back to my community. I've always trained lawyers and participated in conferences and trainings, and also working more recently as a pro bono counsel for the Coalition for Police Accountability in Oakland, and helping them as they've been shaping what the next basis term of accountability will be for the Oakland Police Department.
Absolutely, a very important task, as we have seen some of those statistical numbers show. So talking a little bit about your background obviously has perhaps really helped you to really understand more intimately what are some of those primary driving factors that are leading disproportionately our young people of color to go into confront the law enforcement in a negative circumstance rather than positive, and ending up in juvenile court system.
One of the drivers, I think, that we know of violent crime in any community is the presence of guns and having too many guns in a community. Studies have shown that communities that have more guns have more violence. And one of the worst things we can do is have young people in possession of guns because they don't make the best decisions, and they're not always able to control their emotions, and they might use a gun to do something that, a few years later they realize that wasn't the thing to do. But it may be too late. They may have already taken a life. And so as district attorney, I feel like I have the ability and the obligation to reduce the access to guns in our community, and therefore be able to reach out to young people as well and intervene in ways that helps them to know that they don't need a gun. They should not have to have a gun to feel safe in the community.
Absolutely. So what, for example, programs do you have in mind when you talk about, for example, instead of having juveniles going into incarceration, what programs do you have in mind to try to divert that and perhaps put them into programs that'll get them back on track?
Well, we know we have to invest in community-based programs. I am aware of a number of programs in the Bay Area. We're fortunate that we have a lot of youth programs, both primarily nonprofit, but some that are just really based on occupational, like building opportunities for self-sufficiency. In Oakland, BOSS is a tremendous program. Civicor is a great program in Oakland that gives kids a second chance. Courage and the Urban Peace Movement and Genesis. We have lots of community programs for young people that we need to invest in, and that as district attorney I should be in partnership with to help guide young people, provide resources for young people, opportunities for young people. That's what will help us make our communities safer and stronger.
Absolutely. So what role do you think law enforcement has in ensuring that young people remain safe and have adequate social support, especially Black and brown children, children dealing with difficult socioeconomic circumstances, and children with disabilities and mental health circumstances?
I think law enforcement has a role to play as a supportive role, and not the kind of role that we've seen them traditionally, where they essentially are preying upon young people and, bringing them into situations with a very negative attitude and tracking them and assuming that every young person is going to go to jail forever. That kind of attitude and a mindset has to change. Officers should be engaged in the community and keeping our kids safe. Perfect example, I sued the Union City Police Department a few years ago because a young man ended up being shot on the steps of the local junior high school. 13-year-old Vernon Edens was killed in front of his classmates. And my case was because prior to the events that led up to his death, the police had actually stopped these young men, sat them down on the corner, treated them like they were criminals or truants. It was after school, but they were basically racially profiled, and they treated them like criminals, and then they released them, and within a few moments after they were gone, then they were attacked by drive-by shooters. And so I felt like the police could have handled that situation differently, could have helped those children instead of leaving them in a situation where they were vulnerable and essentially turning their backs on them when they needed protection. And so we weren't successful in that case, but we made the point that children have the right to go to school. They should not feel like they're being shot at or tracked down, and certainly the police should not play a role in making them feel that way.
Absolutely. And I think perhaps sometimes they may not be aware of how powerful and the impact they have being in that position of authority on young minds, right?
Truly, I think one of the horrifying statistics that I've looked at that came out of the Stanford study for the Oakland Police Department was the way in which they handled traffic stops. If you were a black person, 93% of the time when you got a traffic stop, you got handcuffed. And, less than 7% of the time did they handcuff a white person. And those people who were handcuffed, they weren't guilty of any crime. They just got stopped and they ended up being handcuffed and then they got released. But you think about a child who is handcuffed, or a child who sees his or her parent handcuffed. That's the kind of imagery that you're absolutely right. I don't think police get that. Or they come into situations with this warrior mentality and they're confronting whatever the situation is in the household. They've now come into the household, generally it's involuntarily. There are children there who are seeing that, and they don't forget that, ever.
Their minds are very impressionable, definitely. So in terms of schools, some schools, do you believe that there should be police presence in schools, armed or unarmed?
No, I don't. Again, young people are very impressionable, and unfortunately, the role that police have played and the picture that has been presented has not been one of protector, not in many, many situations. There are some exceptions, but generally across the board, young people don't perceive police as their friend because they have not had those kinds of friendly experiences. So I think until we change that dynamic, it does not serve us well to have police in schools.
And speaking of changing that dynamic, what are some of the measures and what programs or support systems or training can we provide to law enforcement and situations can we create within the community to create a more positive interaction?
Well, I'm a big proponent that law enforcement should live in the communities in which they police. I think it makes a real difference when you have a connection to the community and it's not that you're driving in or coming in to a community that you have no connection to. We know that we have to do a better screening job of police officers. We know that we need more transparency around records of police officers. You should not be able to commit an act of excessive force or even murder in one jurisdiction and then immediately leave there and go get another job in a different jurisdiction. And the people who have now hired you and who you are assigned to protect have no idea what your history is or that you have that kind of problem dealing with folks. And so we've got to do better at screening officers, both for their overt biases as well as their implicit biases. We've got to do a better job of connecting officers to the communities that they serve. And we've got to do a better job of what is defining really what is the role of the police officer. Do we need a police? We know we don't need a police officer every time somebody's in a mental health crisis. That usually creates a very deadly situation very quickly, and we've seen that over and over again.
Absolutely. And so what do you think, do you feel that there needs to be improvements in how quickly these situations when there's obviously a questionable interaction between a police officer and a member of the community, do you think that there's problems that need to be solved in terms of turnaround time and releasing those reports when those situations arise to the public?
Oh, for sure. Alameda County has a very bad history of not having timely reports, timely investigations, or having biased investigations. The district attorney's office in our county generally employs retired police officers from particular jurisdictions. And yet when there's an incident involving police and there's an investigation by the DA's office, it can be led by someone who actually has a relationship with that same department. And so there's some inherent conflicts of interest that aren't being acknowledged or recognized or avoided. And so that's a real problem. Also making sure that officers understand what the constitutional standards are. One of the things that we've seen in California is the development of the law, the change in the law, where the legislature has changed for the first time, I think since the 1800s, they changed the standard for the use of deadly force. It is absolutely critical that the district attorney play an active role in training police departments and making sure that they understand the circumstances under which you can use force, the circumstances under which if you use force, it may be deemed unlawful and you may be prosecuted.
And some of the things that, for example, people may not realize is that these police officers are clearly being exposed on a daily, almost daily basis to very, very serious situations that are high stress which inevitably is going to have an impact on their own capability to deal with stress, some more stress. So what ideas do you have about how we can help them to be better able not only to respond but cope with that on a day-to-day basis so that we have high-functioning police officers on the ground?
Well, I've heard different suggestions, everything from police officers should only be allowed to work for 3 years. They should have a limit of term limits on being a police officer, to suggesting that they should only be allowed to work a certain number of hours and they should be getting proper breaks, that would help. We know it is high stress, and we know we don't support officers enough. There's a lot of domestic violence that goes on in the community of police officers with their spouses and their children, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of ways that they display their anxieties and deal with their stresses that we don't acknowledge. It's the same for lawyers, and it's been a struggle within the bar for us to recognize that lawyers need support. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that we really are emphasizing that for police officers who are every day facing uncertain situations. Yeah.
So it's all these different layers that we have to work through, obviously. So what programs do you have in mind in terms of now looking into adult incarceration, nonviolent offenders? What plans do you have in mind in terms of helping formerly incarcerated people reintegrate back into society and for us to reduce recidivism rates?
Yes, that's a wonderful subject that I'm very near and dear to my heart. In 2018, I believe Governor Newsom vetoed legislation that would have established a statewide reentry commission. And clearly there is a need for that because the programs that we have and the budget opportunities that we have are not coordinated. And CDCR tells us that 61% of the people who we release into the community will reoffend within 3 years. That's a 61% failure rate from my perspective. And so when I saw this opportunity to have a reentry commission that would basically have people from all different parts of the criminal justice system, and certainly those who have been incarcerated, those some probably who are still incarcerated, as well as representatives from law enforcement, I thought that is the kind of commission that we can create in the DA's office. And so I will do that.
That's great.
I'm excited to be able to do that. And I have a long history with the folks that are formerly incarcerated. I was the first legal intern for a program called Legal Services for Prisoners with Children, working to help women in prison regain their parental rights and having visitation. And we know family reunification is a key element of preventing recidivism. And so when we are releasing people to the community, we've got to focus not just on that person, we got to focus on the family and the support systems that we have to be able to reintegrate them. And that means housing, it means employment, it means family reunification, it means dealing with the legal impediments and things that we have imposed because they were incarcerated, like fines and fees, which were abolished by the legislature, but they continue to be troubling in some areas. And certainly Alameda County has a very devastating history of using fines and fees to criminalize poverty.
Absolutely. And it's self-propagating, right? It's one of those situations. And I apologize. It was a question I wanted to ask, going back to the school situation and communities of color again. How do we address the school to prison pipeline? What are some of the suggestions or ideas you have, whether for the school system itself or other stakeholders in the situation?
Acknowledging the existence of the school to prison pipeline was a major reason why we took police out of schools. Because police tend, when you have a police presence in schools, you are obviously creating that as an option, and it could in some schools be the first option for young people, is that now you are in custody, you're taken into custody by a police officer, you're taken to juvenile hall. Even if you're released, you are now branded with the stigma of being a criminal. And so we have over-criminalized black and brown youth tremendously. In Alameda County, progressive Alameda County, black and brown children are 86% of all juvenile felony arrests. 86%. That is a horrible statistic, because now they have a felony arrest. Felony arrest, even as a juvenile, can be the basis for a 3 strikes, can be the basis for once you become an adult, that can be the basis for adding enhancements and using your juvenile record to now further criminalize you as an adult. So that has to stop. Not having police in schools is a huge step. Not allowing police to automatically take kids to juvenile hall is a huge step. But that means we have to have structures and systems in place that are alternatives to incarceration. If we're going to talk about pre-arrest diversion, we got to have a program for that, okay? If we're going to talk about pre-plea diversion, we got to have a program for that. We have to have a way of, we've been tracking kids into the juvenile justice system. We got to have a way to get them off that track and put them on the pathway to really having the support that they need to be able to grow up and be safe and have a better perspective about it. I am a big proponent of restorative justice and making sure that we utilize those programs and strategies that work, that help children learn how to, and adults, but young people it's particularly helpful to teach them conflict resolution skills while they're young.
And it's almost preparing them for the things that they will encounter rather than having them to almost take a blunt impact to the system of understanding what's happening,
Hitting them after the fact. I'm also, and have always been, as a champion for women and girls, I've also often said in the school system, we really have to integrate the concept that women and girls are to be respected. And unfortunately, in our society, there are too many ways in which we are disrespected. And that level of disrespect and the acceptability, the normalization of exploitation of women and girls, and what we see, Alameda County remains a major hub for sex trafficking in this community. And when we allow that to be the norm, we set the stage for domestic violence, for sexual exploitation going on. We set the stage for young men not to be able to respect women and have healthy relationships and create families, strong families.
Right, and now that you mentioned that, it reminded me, I know you mentioned in another event that I was in attendance about having worked with the rape kits and providing more, information related, that turnaround time on those rape kits.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's a debate about whether or not we have a backlog in Alameda County of rape kits or not. We know that rape kits need to be processed. We know that people who rape people need to be tracked down. Like, that should be a priority for police, right? It is currently not, because the bulk of the cases that are prosecuted by the DA's office, in fact, are misdemeanors. They're not rape cases. They're not violent felonies against people who are being hurt in this community. And so, again, we have to shift the balance of what is really important. Is it a priority that we stop women from being raped? Absolutely. Is it a priority that we stop young girls from being stalked and tracked into, trafficked? Absolutely. And until we make that clear to law enforcement, and law enforcement is actually being about that, because I can tell you years ago I represented the first female homicide detective in Sacramento County. And in that case, she and her partner talked to me about their homicide solve rate. And I said, okay, what's a homicide solve rate? They said, we solve 80% of the crimes, of the homicides that we investigate. We're very good, right? And so I came home and said, oh, great. Well, let me find out what's the homicide solve rate in Oakland, where I live. It's 30%. 30%. It's even lower than that in San Francisco. I was just reading about that. But in Oakland, which is the largest city in Alameda County, if you kill someone, you have a 70% chance of getting away with it. That tells me there's something really, really wrong with how we are actually policing the community and protecting the community.
Absolutely. Wow. Staggering, those numbers. It is frightening. So, so I would like to give you a chance to brag a little, first of all. I really, no, I think we don't do it enough, especially as women, we don't do it enough. I would like to give you an opportunity to just really talk about some of the initiatives you've really taken most recently and the ones you're going to take in your first year as district attorney.
Well, you're absolutely right. People often tell me that I don't talk enough about the things that I've been able to do. I have always said I'm a blessed child. Because I've been blessed to be able to go and argue before the United States Supreme Court and win, which was every lawyer's dream and, was a tremendous accomplishment. I have been able to work for the Coalition for Police Accountability and have filed litigation on their behalf, and that also was great because nobody had done that. I have been blessed to be able to do many things that most people, nobody's done it before. Somehow I end up doing it. So being the first person to run for Alameda County District Attorney since 1966 is also, to me, a huge honor, because that means we have not had transparency, equity, or accountability. And now that's on the table. That is part of the conversation. And that's only because somebody convinced me that I should run for district attorney.
We need courageous women like you to step up to the plate and run.
Tell me that well-behaved women seldom make history.
So I want to get back to one thing that was really important, and it's something that, remember the bill, the Vision Act came out talking about when people are released, should law enforcement be reporting out people who are undocumented here?
Right. No, of course not. That's a very dangerous practice. It's an unconstitutional practice. The law enforcement community is a small community. It really is a very insular community. And so it's natural that those who are locally, empowered locally would want to cooperate with those who are on the national scene. But we know that every community has different standards. And in Alameda County, we have sanctuary cities. It is our policy and our expectation that we want to be a haven for people, a safe haven for people. Where I've been active on the TPS movement, and making sure that folks have the ability to try to get, their immigration status clarified and confirmed and protected. And that's generally where Alameda County is the majority of our population. And that seems natural to me because we are an incredibly diverse community, right? We are so diverse. I call it the great bubble because we have people here from all over the world. And we all manage to live together, to appreciate the diversity and to allow folks to bring their cultures. And so it's absolutely essential that we respect that we protect that. And certainly as a district attorney, part of what my responsibility is to make sure that our justice system is culturally competent, that it does provide language justice, that we are allowing people to receive justice according to the customs and the language in which they are comfortable. because that's the only way that we can really say we protect immigrant communities.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to loop back around to the second half of that other question. Top 3 priorities in your first year as district attorney.
Well, I've got to deal with gun violence because we have too many guns, and we've gotten, homicides in Oakland. I just read the report from OPD. I mean, they're down from where they were last year, but we saw a tremendous spike in COVID. And we know I have been an activist against gun violence for more than a decade, a long, long time now. So I know that it is an important opportunity for me coming into this position to use my position to reduce gun violence in this community. Number 2, to address mental health challenges. The Department of Justice is prepared to put Alameda County into receivership, and not just because DOJ is coming after us if we don't deal with it, but because it is the right and moral thing to do. Mental illness is not a crime, and we should not be prosecuting people who are suffering from mental health challenges, who may be acting out and engaging in conduct that violates the law simply because they are struggling with a mental illness. And so I've got to be able to balance that and work through that and make sure that our behavioral health systems are actually functioning in a rational, reasonable manner. Before, certainly, I should not be putting people in cages in jail as opposed to helping them find homes and get the medication and the support that they need for a person with mental illness or addiction for that matter. Number 3 is youth justice, making sure that kids don't get thrown away, that they get the best education that they can get and the best educational opportunities. And if they don't want to go to college, that they get the best jobs. I'm a union person. I support unions. I recognize how important it is to protect workers' rights. That's what I've been doing. And so it's critical that I, as a district attorney, and under my leadership, that my entire office is about lifting up kids and families and making Alameda County stronger and safer.
Yes, those programs are so important, especially to be sort of a bridge for young people, whether they want to go into vocational training or, start at a community college. It really helps them find the right fit and keep that education going.
Or open a small business.
Small business.
I'm a big proponent of small businesses. Small businesses employ more people than anybody else. And so we've got to make sure that there is an opportunity for small businesses to employ young people. As a business owner myself in Oakland, one of the things I was most proud of was being part of the Richmond Summer Youth Program for, more than a decade, bringing young people from Richmond on the BART to downtown Oakland to work in a law office. To me, that was so important to do, and to show them this is how you work. This is what a lawyer does, okay? This is how you organize a business, and that's so critical. People need to see that. I know for me, to be a successful businesswoman, I had to look and learn and watch other people who were running their businesses. And so I think that's an opportunity that is sorely underplayed for all of us.
Yes, those mentors are incredibly important, those opportunities to open to things that they would normally not be within their access.
Exactly, expanding their horizons. And that's why I did have some children come to me, some teenagers come from the NAACP chapters and from Oakland, but I really insisted that we partnered with Richmond because I wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity to get on the BART and come from wherever they were in Richmond to downtown Oakland to a large law office with lots of people doing lots of different things, and that they would be assigned different tasks to do.
Wonderful. Is there anything you want to speak to that we haven't had a chance to discuss up until?
I think that it is important in this season to emphasize for sure that I have been a champion for women since 1977, and that it's so important that we continue to have a woman at the helm of the district attorney's office. I was honored, and a lot of my approach to the law was shaped by my experience as the lead plaintiff in the first sexual harassment lawsuit under Title IX, where we literally were making the law as we went along, but we were making a law that existed 37 words, but it had no meaning unless and until a band of young women with some very young lawyers, decided that we were going to take these 37 words and apply them to the situation, to the harm that these women had experienced, and make it meaningful. And that was the genesis of my advocacy as a civil rights lawyer, was understanding this is what the law says, this is everyday people's experience, how do we match those things? Because that's where justice lies. And so I've been doing that, living my making doing that. And I'm really proud of that, having represented the thousands of women inside the California Department of Corrections, incredibly brave women that went to work every day. And again, this is an occupation that didn't require a lot of education, but it provided opportunities for women to go to work and make a very good living and raise their children and have a family and have, meaningful lives in this country. It's been, for them, it was a great occupation. And the idea that women should not be able to benefit from that became a lot of my 30 years of working. And I'm really proud of having done that and done that well.
And we're incredibly grateful for all of your work. So I wanted to know, this race is obviously a very competitive race, and I'd like to know myself and perhaps let the voters know, why are you their best choice?
I am the best choice because I am the one that has the tenacity, courage, and wisdom to turn this ship around and bring the change. Everyone in the race agrees that the system is broken. So the question is, who has the tenacity, who has the courage, who has the wisdom based on my life experience to fix it? And that would be me. Also, we're at a crossroads. We can continue to invest in a failed and broken system and failed leadership, because that's what we've had for the last 40 years. We can continue to invest in that, or we can step forward in 2022. The opportunity to step forward is the first time that we've had an open seat since 1939. I'm the first person to run since 1966, which means I've had the time to talk to voters, to listen to voters, to really understand from the community's perspective what is wrong with this system and what do we need to fix. And I tell people, don't be confused by the fact that this is the first time that we're going to have a black district attorney, because all the candidates are black. All of us know, particularly those of color, we know there is a difference between Thurgood Marshall and Clarence Thomas. And so the question is, do we want a Clarence Thomas administration of justice, or do we want a Thurgood Marshall administration of justice? That's the difference.
So to close out, you can say either just a name or give a one line or two, couple lines of explanation. Who are three people in your life who have greatly influenced you, public or personal?
Well, my foster moms. Amy Jenkins was somebody that held me accountable, that inspired me, though, to be better than I was, and that told me I could be anything that I could be. And when I graduated from high school and got ready to go to Yale, she told me, go as far as you can and don't look back. And that gave me the freedom to travel the world. And I've done that and had big fun doing it. So I always give her credit for that. Certainly Alice Aaron, my other foster mom, who, had a fifth grade education, but raised her kids, raised her grandkids. She was like the big mama of the family, right? And the matriarch. And her love was so unconditional and never ending that I know what it means to have a real mother who will stand by you, even in your worst days. Because she would just look at me sometimes and just shake her head. But I knew she loved me. Yeah, and I think finally I would say Attorney Howard Moore Jr., who was my first mentor in the law. And I worked with the lawyers on my case, but when I came to California, I came here with nothing. And I was given his name and his phone number and told that I should call him if anything went wrong. So I called Mr. Moore and said, I'm here, and my Uncle Richard says, you need to watch out for me and make sure I don't get into trouble. And he did that very well. And I really appreciate that. Because of him, I tried my first federal case. Because of him, I was able to get past the bar exam. The bar examiners had a few questions for me, and he managed that. And then, you know, in my really challenging time when I was being prosecuted by the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, he was there for me. And because of him, we went to trial, and I was acquitted. And if I hadn't had that resource, I probably wouldn't be a lawyer today. So I owe a great deal to Attorney Howard Moore Jr. And he's a great lawyer and a great man. Yeah.
Your story is truly a testament to the importance of us having community mentors and making sure it really does take an entire community to make sure that our children are well and can achieve their goals in life. So where can voters go to learn more about you or reach out to you if they have additional questions?
Sure. I can be found online at Pamela Price 4da.com. That's Pamela Price, the number 4da.com. And you can see there what I've been doing for the last 30 years and what my 10-point platform is, what we hope to accomplish for Alameda County. You can donate, you can volunteer, and you can follow the purple flag, and we will show you what we're doing and how we're going to make it. June 7th is right around the corner, so we urge everyone to vote, to follow the purple flag, and to elect Pamela Price for District Attorney in 2022.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pamela, for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you and hearing your platform.
Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise. And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.